Always enjoy our debates, which they are. Let's start with what's happening in Lebanon, because we may find some areas of agreement here, I suspect. But first of all, Hezbollah. Do you see a distinction between Hezbollah and, say, Hamas?
Oh boy, let's buckle up because we're diving into a no-holds-barred debate between Mehdi Hasan and Piers Morgan on one of the most contentious topics in geopolitics: Israel, Hezbollah, Hamas, and the ongoing violence in Lebanon and Gaza. Hasan brings receipts, throwing down hard data and historical context, while Piers struggles to reconcile defense arguments with the devastating civilian toll. Spoiler alert. Mehdi Hasan is running intellectual circles around Piers, and it's not even close. This debate is a masterclass in how facts can completely dismantle loaded narratives. Let's get into it.
In what sense?
In what they are, what they represent, how they have acted.
I mean, they're very different groups. They operate in different places, in different contexts. I guess what they have in common is that they both came out of Israel's occupation of their land, right? Hamas comes out of the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza, and many people are not aware of the fact that Israel occupied Lebanon, southern Lebanon, for 18 years, from 1982 to 2000 when they withdrew, although the Lebanese argue that there's still an occupation of a piece of Lebanese land called the Sheba Farms. So in that sense, they're similar. They're obviously different in some of their tactics. They're different religions. Well, they're different sects, I apologize, not different. They're both Muslim, but one is Shia, one is Sunni. They're both backed by Iran. I mean, look, there's similarities, differences. I think what's really interesting this time round is we've seen for a year Israel killing thousands of civilians in Gaza and saying, well, Hamas is to blame because of human.
Hasan wastes no time calling out the hypocrisy in Israel's justification for mass civilian casualties. By shifting to Lebanon, where the same narrative doesn't hold up, he forces Piers to confront the weaknesses of his argument. Hasan's point? When civilian deaths are staggering, blaming human shields starts to feel like a tired excuse rather than a valid defense.
Shields because of tunnels. That argument just does not work in Lebanon. They've killed 550 people, Piers, on Monday. An insane amount of people in a single day, one of the highest single-day death tolls in modern warfare. Almost all of them civilians, according to the Lebanese Health Ministry, which is not Hezbollah, by the way. You know, they always say Hamas-controlled health ministry in Gaza. So I think what we've seen is so phenomenally bad on Israel's end and so little defense. You know, October 7th was used, as you and I have discussed before, as the excuse for killing tens of thousands of Palestinians.
Well, I would categorize it differently. I don't think they use it as an excuse to go and kill tens of thousands of Palestinians. They responded to one of the most egregious terror attacks of modern times.
But when does the response end? We're nearly a year in.
Well, that's the question. That is the question.
Well, that's when it becomes an excuse. When you carry on killing and killing.
Is it an excuse, or is it that they are wedded to the elimination of Hamas because Hamas has persistently said, we want to keep doing the same thing over and over again? And there's a correlation with Hezbollah, whose charter is very explicit. They stand for the eradication of Israel. I mean, that's what they're about.
That doesn't justify killing 500 people in a single day, does it?
I didn't say it did, but
okay. That's what bothers me. That's what happened this week. That's the big story. Hezbollah's charter is irrelevant to what we're talking about. That's not why they killed 500 people on Monday, Piers. I mean, Hezbollah's charter's been around for years.
I don't think it's irrelevant that you have a terror group on your doorstep who are wedded to your extinction. Why is that irrelevant?
I think the language you use is loaded, Piers. You say on your doorstep. Do you know they did a poll of Americans a while back who thought that Palestinians were occupying Israel? When we talk about this stuff, we make it sound like Israel is the one being occupied, besieged. Israel's the one that's occupying the West Bank and Gaza, longest military occupation in the world, going back to 1967. Israel is the country that occupied southern Lebanon. I mean, everything, the world did not begin on October the 7th. 1978, Israel invades southern Lebanon. 1982, Israel invades southern Lebanon. Sabra and Shatila massacre. 2006, Second Lebanon War, murder 100 people.
But you always make it sound like they're just doing this for the sake of it. They're not.
What are they doing it for?
Well, they've been provoked by Hezbollah.
Hezbollah didn't exist in 1978, Piers.
OK, I'm talking about the specifics of going on now. The provocation since October the 7th. Hezbollah's first response to October the 7th was to unleash rockets on Israel.
That's not true.
On October the 8th.
That's not true. That's not true.
That is what happened.
Where did they fire the first rocket?
They fired rockets on the 8th.
Hasan is now cutting to the core of the issue: occupation. He's not sugarcoating it, arguing that territorial expansionism is the driver of resistance and violence. Piers' attempts at both sides pivot, but Hasan stays locked on the main point. Violence won't end until the occupation does. This is Hasan at his sharpest, dismantling myths with surgical precision.
Where?
Well, you tell me.
No, you just said they fired at Israel. Where?
Well, they fired in the direction of Israel.
Where did they hit? They fired at the
if you
Sheba
know the
Farms.
answer, tell me.
I do. They fired at the Sheba Farms, which, as I said earlier, is an area of Syria. Well, the Lebanese claim it's Lebanon. Syria claims it's Lebanon. Israel says no and is occupying the Sheba Farms. They fired at Israeli military installations in the Sheba Farms. Now, have they got fired in Israel?
So
since?
they were firing
Of
at
course
Israel.
have.
They were
Of course
firing.
have.
They were firing
Yes.
at an area that Israel says is theirs.
No, Israel doesn't say that. Israel says it's Syria's. Because remember, Piers, Israel is occupying Syria and the West Bank and Gaza, and Lebanon would argue parts of
how
Lebanon.
would you-
This is the problem, right? The core of the problem is
I know it's
Israel's territorial expansionism.
It's a mess.
Attacks, not a mess. It's Israel occupying multiple Arab lands, which leads to quote-unquote resistance or quote-unquote terrorism, whichever word. I don't care what word you want to use right now. But that is the core, right? You had John Mearsheimer on the show this week, made the same point. Deal with the occupation, then you deal with the violence. And look, has Hezbollah fired into Israel at civilian attack? Yes, I don't agree with that. But the reality is 82% of the exchange of fire between Lebanon and Israel since October the 7th has been done by Israel.
Okay.
82%.
But here's
is that not a provocation of
Let me
Hezbollah?
finish my point, which is that since October the 8th, 19,000 missiles, rockets have come from Hezbollah to Israel, right?
But way more from Israel into Lebanon.
Well, I'm sure.
82%.
Of course they've responded. What else are they supposed to do?
82%.
But
So
aren't they-
this is not two equal sides.
so they can't defend themselves.
But the vast majority of attacks is on Lebanon.
Okay,
not the
but
other
would
way
you condemn the firing of rockets by Hezbollah or not?
Of course, I condemn all attacks on
Okay.
civilian targets.
Well,
we
we'll
know
come
that,
to-
Piers. We've discussed this
I'm
many
gonna
times
come to
before.
Israel's
I don't
response.
come on shows to defend militant groups or
Okay.
foreign governments.
Okay, so-
I come on shows to say, let's end the violence.
Yeah.
Let's sort out what the solution is.
Yeah.
Let's look at the root cause of the violence. It is undeniable that the root cause of the violence is Israel, Israel's occupation, the genocide in Gaza. What did the leader of Hezbollah say? He said, we won't fire any rockets if you end the killing in Gaza. What did the president of Iran say? We won't retaliate for what you did to Ismail Haniyeh on Iranian soil if you end the killing in Gaza. What did the Houthis say? We'll stop blocking ships if you end the killing in Gaza. Where do all roads lead back to?
Why would you
End
believe?
the
Why would
killing
you
in
believe
Gaza.
any of those people?
I don't believe any of them. I'm Ronald Reagan.
You're citing them
No,
as if they're sort of gospel
I'm Ronald-
statements from people who have unimpeachable
I'll tell you why,
integrity.
if you let me
Come off
finish.
it.
I'm Ronald Reagan.
A bunch of terrorists said, we won't do X, Y, Z
I'm
if you do this.
I'm Ronald Reagan. I say verify. Call their bluff. If they're lying, call their bluff. Stop the Gaza fighting and then see what happens.
Yeah, but Israel has called Hamas's bluff.
When?
There was a ceasefire in place
When?
before October the 7th.
That's not true.
Well, it is true.
That's not true.
Well, it is true.
It's fundamentally false. They were attacking Palestinians the week before October the 7th.
There was-
in September, you
there
can
was a
Google it on that
ceasefire
tablet. What's
in
your
place.
definition of a ceasefire?
Well,
Israel gets to attack people and not the other way around.
Okay.
In September, hold on. In September, you just made a charge that's not true. There's a tablet there. You can Google it. Guardian headline, right there. You can go see the news report.
I don't Google during interviews.
Well, afterwards, everyone can. There's a Guardian headline, September 2023, a month before October the 7th. The headline is Palestinians shot in the ankles by Israel in Gaza, attacked. There were airstrikes in Gaza. And by the way, Gaza's not isolated. Gaza and the West Bank under international law are one entity. There were several hundred Palestinians killed in the West Bank before October
But
the
my
7th.
point to you, Mehdi, is
So there was no ceasefire. You just
Okay.
can't say, it's just not true.
they would say there was a ceasefire.
And it's not true.
We'd say otherwise.
The facts say otherwise, Piers.
But what I've noticed with you is you always downplay anything which might be deemed by Israel to be provocation.
No.
You're always
Not at all.
very,
Did I
very-
downplay October 7th? I don't think I ever have on your show or anywhere else.
No, but,
It's a horrible crime.
But what you do, in your debating style, and it's an impressive debating style, but you always pivot back to, yeah, but the real problem's Israel. Yeah, but the real problem's Israel.
Hold on. If
They're to blame for everything.
we're going to talk about styles, Piers, you're famous for interview style that begins with condemn this group, that group,
Right.
that group. On Monday, 500. Hold on. Let me finish my point. Then you come back in. 500 people were killed on Monday. 100 women, 50 children. I assume you condemn that and don't support the killing of civilians
I don't.
in Lebanon,
Yeah.
right? 500 people died. That's the equivalent of 30,000 Americans or 6,000 Brits in a day.
Sure.
And yet we started this interview with Hezbollah Charter. So if you're going to talk about styles, you're focusing on the wrong thing.
Okay.
I'm going to focus on 500 people dead.
Okay, let me go back to the week before, where 3,000 Hezbollah terrorists were targeted specifically.
How do you know that?
What do you mean? How do I know that?
You just said 3,000 Hezbollah terrorists were
How
targeted.
many was it?
I don't know. I'm asking you. Made the claim. How
That
do you
is
know
what's
it's
been
3,000?
reported.
By
Do you
who?
dispute that?
Yeah, I dispute everything Israel
But
says.
you
They've
don't know
lied
the
for
real
a year,
number.
Piers.
You don't know the real number.
But I didn't give a number. You did.
Well, what has been the number from the other side?
I didn't give a number. You said 3,000 terrorists. I'm wondering why.
That is what's been reported.
No, it's not reported. It's what's said by Israel.
Boom. Hassan throws out a statistic bombshell that flips the narrative of equal conflict on its head. Piers tries to deflect by focusing on Hezbollah's provocative narrative. But Hassan shreds this argument by showing how Israel's overwhelmingly military response erases the context of defense. The imbalance is glaring, and it's clear Hassan is in control of this debate.
Or it says what's said by people speaking on behalf of Israel.
So
was a little girl
Israel
who died?
hang on. Israel hasn't even said it did it.
They have in private. It's been reported widely
you?
No, to the American government.
Okay, but don't say they said it publicly. They haven't.
But
obviously, I believe they did it, right? But
I believe they did it
but
too.
You're saying they said this in public.
You just gave a 3,000 number, and I'm wondering. I just saw a little girl's funeral last week. Was she a Hezbollah terrorist in your view?
No.
So then why did you say 3,000 terrorists? There was a kid killed.
I was about to say that in the process of targeting very specifically, in an extraordinarily whichever way you
in a
look
terror attack.
Well, that's what I'm going to come to. So they target 3,000 Hezbollah terrorists with their pagers, walkie-talkies, and so on. In the process, a small, comparative to that number, a small number of civilians get killed, which is obviously deplorable. But my point to you is, if someone's been chucking rockets over for a year at you and your people, you've had to displace 60,000 people from the north of your country because of this relentless bombardment, and you eventually respond in such a precise, targeted fashion, right? And in the process, some civilians are killed, which is never acceptable, can never be condoned, never be supported. But if it is right, as has been widely reported by all mainstream media, that 3,000 terrorists
associated with Hezbollah. Not everybody in Hezbollah is a terrorist.
Okay.
Like a driver, a nurse.
3,000 members of Hezbollah were targeted, right?
Yeah.
Would you say that is, some people have claimed is unlawful?
Yep.
You've said it's a terror attack, so you think it was illegal.
Yep.
But I would say that's not. I mean, I would say that if you look at that in totality, they are responding to rocket attacks all year, and they are being extremely precise, unlike what they've been doing in Gaza, where I do not accept that Israel has been doing this precision targeting they keep talking about, and I've held them to account for that. I do think in this particular occasion, they were extremely precise, and it was a brilliant piece of warfare, right, if you want to call it that. Notwithstanding, I don't like any war, nor do you. But my point is, surely that is justified. I mean, in some parts of this, you have to say Israel's entitled to defend itself.
So actually, Lebanon is the one that needs to defend itself. As we say, 500 people killed on a day. Look, you are right. You have held. I've watched your interviews with Israeli spokespersons. You have held them to account on their nonsense about casualty numbers. But let me just say three very brief things on that. Number one, you said just a moment ago, when they eventually respond, you use that phrase eventually. That's just factually inaccurate. We already discussed.
No, you're talking about
82% of the attacks. They have been bombing Lebanon for a year. Now, you can say who started it, whatever. I'm not talking about. But they've been attacking Lebanon.
But this is a significant escalation.
Yes, but 5 days after October the 7th, or 6 days after, they killed a Reuters video journalist in southern Lebanon, a man called Issam Abdullah, killed, according to Reporters Without Borders, targeted by Israel. According to the UN, a war crime, right? So they have been killing people in Lebanon who have nothing to do with Hezbollah for a year now. So let's not say eventually. Number two, I would say, yes, it's an act of terror. And that's just not my view. You know Leon Panetta, former Obama defense secretary, former head of the CIA. When the former head of the CIA comes out and says Israel is committing an act of terror, I think we should take that seriously. But it's not just him. A group of UN special rapporteurs on human rights and extrajudicial killings put out a statement.
But many other people have said it was not an act of
course,
terror.
and that's the problem with international law. People can argue it all ways. You know that you and I are not lawyers, but we know that lawyers can argue.
But do you not think that action
things.
was justified?
No, of course not. I don't think you should booby-trap devices. It's against international law to use booby traps. I think I'm actually petrified, separate to the politics of the Middle East, Piers. I'm actually petrified at the ability of governments to use technology and surveillance to track us and now kill us. I think there's a wider discussion to be had. I think the idea that Israel keeps opening the doors to all sorts of new precedents that other governments will run with and we will regret. I think, going into the supply chain of devices, phones, beepers, whatever, pagers, I think that's very, very worrying. I also think from a practical point of view, it's not targeted. If you blow up a guy with a pager, even if you think he's a terrorist or a terrorist leader, you don't know if he's driving, he's at an intersection, he's about to crash his car into children crossing the road. We saw them going off in grocery stores. It's taken out people's eyes, fingers. No, I don't think it's targeted. I think it's barbaric.
Hassan doesn't just argue, he demolishes. His ability to keep bringing the conversation back to the historical and factual roots of the conflict highlights the limits of Piers' emotional appeals. If you're watching this thinking Piers would land some big hits, sorry. It's a knockout victory for Mehdi Hasan. Facts, contacts, and unrelenting focus win every time. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. Comment down below what you think. This is only part 1. Stay tuned for part 2 and 3.